It's that time again, folks. It's time for the original Dragon Talk Radio. I'm your host, John Clement. Are you ready? Let's do this thing. Welcome to the launch episode of the original Dragon Talk Radio, Volume 4. Now, Episode 1 of the original Dragon Talk Radio, Volume 1, well, that would have aired on Super Bowl weekend in 2009. Back then, we used the Blog Talk Radio platform, and the subtitle for the show back then was Your Convention Connection. So back then, it was called Dragon Talk Radio, Your Convention Connection. And today we're going to talk a little bit about that old show that we used to be, and then we're going to talk about the show that we are now, the show that launches today, Volume 4. So, the original show was called Dragon Talk Radio, Your Convention Connection, and based out of the St. Louis, Missouri area, I traveled to conventions as far north as Chicago from there, as far south as Dallas from there, as far east as Omaha from there, and as far west as Tennessee, Memphis and Nashville in Tennessee. So it was a pretty good swath. I never made it to the East Coast or the West Coast, but right there in the central United States area, that was it was Dragon Talk Radio, Your Convention Connection. So the idea was that I'd be boots on the ground and that I'd walk around in the convention for you. So it was kind of like a reality type of thing. Now this started in 2009, and it ran from 2009 until 2012. And it was fun. We met a lot of amazing people, and I'm going to share a few names of the guests that were on the show, but I don't want anybody to feel left out. So if you remember a show where one of your favorite people was there and I don't mention it, sorry. If you were on the show and I don't mention you, sorry. But I just need to drop a few names so that we can move on. But we had people on the show back then. I remember we had William Catt on the show from The Greatest American Hero in the 80s. We had Jackson Bostwick on the show, Captain Marvel Shazam from the 70s. And then I didn't plan this, okay? This was kind of a happy accident, but we hit 70s, 80s, and 90s 3 weeks in a row because we had Jackson Bostwick on from the 70s, William Catt from the 80s, and then Eric Stewart from the 90s. And Eric Stewart is an extremely talented musician, and how he connects to the 90s is he voice acted many of the American voiceover versions of the Pokemon cartoons and movies. He was the voice of Brock, and if I remember correctly, he was the voice of one of the Pokemon. I want to say it was Squirtle, and I'm sorry if I'm not remembering that correctly, but yeah, it was huge part of my life. It was incredibly fun. And the original Dragon Talk Radio, what I'm calling Volume 1 now, with this being Volume 4, because we've come back a couple times since then. So I guess, we could talk about, original Dragon Talk Radio Volume 2 and original Dragon Talk Radio Volume 3. They didn't last nearly as long, and didn't do nearly as much, and I didn't really travel with those. But the original concept, Dragon Talk Radio Volume 1, Dragon Talk Radio, Your Convention Connection, that was amazing. I don't know how many thousands of miles I drove. And because I was naive and not quite as savvy with business as hopefully I've learned a few things now. Nowadays, there's apps on your phone that'll keep track of the mileage you're driving for business, and for tax purposes at the end of the year and stuff like that. And I definitely took a hit there just from being naive and stuff, or just, I don't know, in life you just got to get out and try things. But In 2012, the original Dragon Talk Radio did end because stuff was happening in my life, and I wound up homeless, living on the street. And that story is not for today. Today we're talking about Dragon Talk Radio. If you are interested in what happened in my life, and how the original Dragon Talk Radio ended when I was homeless on the street, it has to do with divorce. And that story is actually in one of my books, The Divorce Dad's Dojo, Volume 1. And there's a link below to the website, divorcedadsdojo.com, where you can, get a hold of that book, or even just read a little blurb about it to kind of, if you're interested in what I'm talking about, but you don't necessarily want to read a whole book or buy a whole book or read a whole book. So from 2009 to 2012, that was the original Dragon Talk Radio. It was amazing. I love conventions. Just walking around, taking video and pictures and interviewing the cosplayers alone, and then of course you meet the artists and the authors and the actors and the comic book writers and the cartoon voice actors, and just the incredible people that you meet, whether you meet them just once, or whether they become acquaintances, or whether they become friends. Just the people that you meet, that intersect with your circle in that convention life. I remember I was always disappointed, on Sunday afternoon as the convention started tearing down, because I wanted it to go on forever. So the original vision of the original Dragon Talk Radio was your convention connection, and so we had guests on the show who were all those things. We've had actors and voice actors and authors and comic book writers and cartoon writers and artists of in almost every medium you can imagine. In fact, we used to talk about how it would be cool to do an art version of Iron Chef, like an art version. Today's medium is charcoal, or whatever. Just to really, we used to talk about what it would be like to have the artist just show up and surprise, try to work with this medium. It was a lot of fun. I got to promote, my books and stuff while I was out there, as well. And, I will never forget a lot of those times of my life. And a lot of those people are still in my life today. Some of those people have passed on, which makes me feel a little bit old. Last week I turned 53. But I did the math, and I think when I started the original Dragon Talk Radio, I was 38. So I am a nerd. I am a guy without a real life. But so I've often thought about, to kind of segue into today, enough memory lane, enough looking back at the old Dragon Talk Radio, to kind of segue into today and what we're doing with the original Dragon Talk Radio Volume 4 here. Is I've often thought about bringing the show back and doing new episodes of the show and stuff. But one thing that I've noticed about fandom is fandom has gotten very, very fractionated. There's just splits and divides in politics and culture wars type stuff, and it's I'm sure you guys are living in this culture too. If you're hearing my voice, you're living in these times, 2020, right now it's 2024. So there's just a lot of polarization. There's a lot of animosity, and I would even whip out the H word and say hate. There's just, it wouldn't be the same. The nerd stuff, geek stuff, gaming stuff, sci-fi stuff, fantasy stuff, comic book stuff, it's not as unifying as it used to be. I often make the analogy that what has happened to nerd stuff is the same thing that happened to music. When I was a kid in the 80s, us 80s kids, we would all listen to the same music. Even if we didn't like a particular thing, like some people liked the love song ballads, and some people liked the more guitar, heavy metal stuff, and some people liked the British pop invasion dance techno stuff, and some people liked the early 80s version of rap and hip hop that existed back then, and some people liked, not everybody, and some people liked the completely synthetic bands like, what were they called? The Hispanic one was called Menudo. Oh yeah, the Americanized one was called New Kids on the Block. But, bands that were completely put together, not organically because musicians got together on their own organically, but just formula bands that a studio created. So I remember how big New Kids on the Block was, and at the time, the girls my age were all into New Kids on the Block, and the boys my age were like, they're not even a real band. Like, music executives scouted them out and put them together. They didn't organically come together and know each other and meet each other and say, hey, let's make music together like a real band. So, but the thing is, everybody listened to the same thing. And we all sang along on each other's songs. I mean, I remember the 1980s boom boxes, and there would usually be somebody who had one on a bus, and they'd start playing the music, and we'd all sing each other's songs. And we would just, if it wasn't exactly our kind of song, we would sing it anyway, and, because we'd get to ours. The music, the radio stations were all blended. The radio stations were all mixed. So there'd be a little, there'd be a British techno pop hypno dance thing, and then there'd be a long hair heavy metal band, and then there'd be some slow love ballad, and it would all be mixed up, back to back to back. It was a variety, or we might even say a diversity of music. And what happened then, since the 80s, is music has gotten segmented and fractionated, and people started kind of only listening to their stuff. And the same thing has happened with our nerd stuff, geek stuff, gaming stuff. And a lot of times these days along political lines, along cultural lines. And so when I thought about bringing Dragon Talk Radio back, I thought, wow, that would not work the same. Because everybody's wanting you to choose a side in the culture war. Everybody's, it's sad that it's not as unifying as it was. But one of the things that I'm seeing here, that's contributed to you guys hearing Volume 4 starting today, is that what I'm seeing in the world of fandom is I'm seeing the fans start to take stuff back. I'm seeing players of Dungeons and Dragons taking Dungeons and Dragons back from WotC, just ignoring WotC, letting WotC go broke, and just continuing to play D&D the way they think it should be played. And the same thing has started to happen very recently with Warhammer 40k. There are all kinds of Warhammer 40k players that are going to continue Warhammer 40k in their lives. They're just going to ignore Games Workshop. What's happened to the franchises, and I think it started, with Disney Star Wars, and then, it has gone on to every other franchise, the Star Trek and Terminator, and then there's that whole Amazon thing with the Lord of the Rings, and lately there's been more stuff with Star Wars, and so many of the franchises are all fractionated now in their fandoms, so I'm kind of noticing here that fans are starting to curate their own they're starting to curate their own fandom. They're not going to have some big corporation tell them what they can and can't be a fan of, or what their pop culture has to be like. That's it. Fans are starting to curate their own pop culture. There we go. Fans are starting to curate their own pop culture, and I'm all about that. So the original Dragon Talk Radio would showcase artists, it would showcase actors, it would showcase writers, it would showcase cartoonists, it would showcase game developers. The original Dragon Talk Radio showcased all these different people that I would go meet at the conventions. And then I'd ask them, politely and stuff, hey, would you mind being on a podcast? And it was a beautiful thing. And so we're doing that now. I'm not going to be traveling to conventions quite so much. But we got the internet now is pretty much like a convention. So if you are out there and you are not selling out to the big corporations, if you have books, if you have comic books, if you are designing a game of any kind, whether it's a board game, a card game, a video game, whatever, if you are a creator out there creating content, creating, developing games, creating stuff for we, the nerds, geeks, and gamers of the world to do, for us to groove on, for us to enjoy, then we want to celebrate you here at the original Dragon Talk Radio. So there'll be a link down below to our Discord server. And if anybody wants to suggest, and you don't have to be humble, you can suggest yourself. Hey, I'm an author. I write stuff. I'm going to be promoting my own stuff here. So, you don't have to be humble. You can suggest yourself. If you got something going on, let us know, because, we're going to be showcasing, the world of more fan curated or small business, small corporation, people running things out of their garage, people running things out of their bedroom with an internet connection. If you're ready to take back pop culture fandom, that's what this is about. This original Dragon Talk Radio Volume 4 is about taking back pop culture fandom. So, that's pretty much my intro to what's going on. That's pretty much this first episode. And tonight's game, one of the things that I've been doing lately is I started a company called The Game Shop's Basement. And I'll I've already yacked a whole bunch this episode, so I'll get into all those details. Excuse me, I'll get into those details later, some other episode or something. Some of you are already aware, but I started game mastering professionally to make money during the COVID times. And I don't do it full time anymore. But if you go to the link on our Discord server below, on Tuesday nights are Fallout nights. So we're doing Fallout Florida. It's free to watch. It is a paid game, because I got bills to pay. But it is free to hang out and watch. Especially if you got jokes. Come meet us, hang out with us. We're going to do some Fallout. Link below for Discord. And today's product of the day is from Smurdiverse Entertainment. That's one of my companies, full disclosure. And that is Smurd's Book of ABCs. So we're looking at entertainment for all levels. So yes, it's an ABC book for kids. It was nominated for the Golden Duck Award in 2007. And I was at a convention in the Chicago area called DuckCon, where they nominate things for the Golden Duck Award. And I remember the judges said that they thought it was very interesting, not necessarily in a bad way. They thought it was very innovative, which starts with I, because we're talking about the letter I. This has been brought to you by the letter I. But the word for I was illness, and the judges said, well, that's a negative word, but they said that's actually good in their eyes, because not everything in life is positive and fun all the time, and kids realize that. And getting sick is something that happens to kids. It's part of their experience of being a kid, is looking back and remembering the times you were sick. But yeah, Smurd's Book of ABCs. Smurd is kind of like the vanguard character for my comic book superhero inspired universe. I don't want to say superhero. I gotta be careful of how much I say that, because some of you nerds already know this, but the word superhero is jointly trademarked or copyrighted or something by DC and Marvel. So if you actually look at my materials, it always says costumed hero or something like that. So I'm saying superhero inspired. I'm trying to cover myself there. But if you're tired of what DC and Marvel have done to their superhero universes, check out the Smurdiverse. I'll put the link down for that below, smurdiverse.com. And there are, webcomics that I'll be putting up. There's novels, there's books, little kids books, and there's a Kindle Vella that is expanding a little bit every week, exploring the Smurtiverse world of costumed heroes. And so there'll be links below to some stuff, starting today. Welcome aboard. It's going to be quite a ride because I don't even know where it's going. I don't know what's going to happen to our hobbies, to our fandoms, to our pop culture. But this is where I want to be and what I want to be doing with the original Dragon Talk Radio. I know you're out there. I know some of you already. And if you're doing something cool, if you are going to refuse to bow the knee to your corporate overlords, if you're not going to bow to political correctness or that kind of stuff, that's what we fans need to do. I saw on the news today, our kind of news, nerd type news, that the players of Helldivers 2 managed to get Sony to reverse their PlayStation policy. And there's getting to be more and more and more successful stuff as fans are curating their own pop culture now, and kind of letting big corporations know, hey, we're the customers. You get your money from us. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and sign off here and start prepping for tomorrow's show. So welcome to the original Dragon Talk Radio Volume 4. We're back, and we're going to see where this goes.